Okay, so hi and welcome. I hope everybody's safe and well. On the Community Sport Hub project, we've really been reflecting on what the past 5 months has taught us, and I guess one of the huge positives has been that the Community Sport Hub Officer Network's been way more connected and has come a lot closer together during lockdown. We've witnessed the emergence of new phenomena like the hot topic call. I came from an amazing one this morning on asset transfer. And what we want to do in the project is foster more of these types of conversations. So we're going to try out a podcast style session that we want to share across the Community Sport Hub Officer Network. We're going to call them Let's Talk Community Sport Hubs. And more specifically, today we're going to focus in on our lockdown learnings and experiences. So this is the first edition of these kind of Let's Talk discussions. Our plan is to create a series of conversations that we can share with the network, and they'll be shared through the Sport Scotland Sharing and Learning app. So today I'm delighted to welcome Jayne Smith and Donald Hall into our virtual meeting room. They've both just joined the Community Sport Hub project group to represent you guys, the Community Sport Hub officers. And in that role, they're really going to help us shape and inform the direction that the Community Sport Hub project takes, and also provide their opinions and thoughts from a Community Sport Hub officer perspective on the support that network really needs to be successful in their role. So huge thanks for joining us, guys. As I said, in this conversation, we're going to ask you guys to share your experiences with your peers so that they can, I guess, reflect and improve how we support our community sport hubs across Scotland. So, Jayne, you're one of 2 community sport hub officers in the City of Edinburgh Council, and you've been working with your community sports hubs and clubs throughout the whole of lockdown. And Donald, you're with Highlands up in the north, and you were furloughed initially, returning to your post in June. So it'll be great to get a couple of different perspectives on what lockdown has meant for you. So I'll probably come to you first, Donald. As I say, you're employed by the Leisure Trust up there in Highlands, and you were furloughed until June. It's great to have you back on board. And I'm keen to just get a sense of how the furlough experience was for you, and how you felt coming back into the role.
Okay, well, delighted to be here and be part of this. So I suppose, like many other people, we're all working really hard in March, and this coronavirus was coming in, and for me, it certainly felt like the world in a way was going to stop and change, and it has. So during March and into April, we were furloughed. So it went from 100 miles an hour trying to do my sport, finish up as much as we could, to completely stopping and switching computers off. That was a really strange experience, but it was also quite nice just to completely stop and focus on the real important things of life and being healthy, looking after family. Up here and I suppose the rest of Scotland, we had some really nice weather, over April and May. So that certainly helped, although you can't really tell that from my lack of suntan.
I was going to say, you can see that in your tan.
I never get a tan. I'm either white or red. Anyway, so the furlough experience, there was an overall anxiety, I think, just to the bigger picture and the bigger situation, which I'm sure everyone kind of felt. It was quite nice to completely stop and take stock, but I was also quite keen to get back in the mix and try and get back to some sort of normality. And I'm glad that I am back now, and I'm involved as a hub officer again.
So, how I guess are you going to take some of that experience, which is pretty unique? Furlough was one of these words that we didn't know, nobody knew 6 months ago. How are you going to take that experience and use it to, I guess, improve your support to your hubs and clubs?
Well, I suppose it was a real leveler that we were all in the same boat, regardless of your job, your background, whatever, we were all under lockdown, and we all had that time to reconnect with our families.
Yep.
And to try and stay healthy. And I know a lot of people still work throughout that, so it was a different experience. But for me, it's that having that empathy and that understanding of everyone was in that same boat. We all share anxieties about what the future holds, and understanding how the world will change now, and in terms of how we deliver sport and physical activity for the community, which is such an essential thing to help people come out of lockdown and any challenges that they had.
Yeah, it's really helpful just to get your perspective. I mean, I know we still have a number of the officers in the Community Sport Hub network still on furlough. They've still got to experience that transition back into work. So I'm sure if you might have your phone ringing from a couple of them down the line, just asking how things were. And I guess you talked about that other experience, and that other experience being those that have been kind of connecting to club and community organisations through the whole of lockdown. And that brings me to you, Jayne. You've been very much doing that. You've been working with hubs and clubs throughout the whole of lockdown. It's been a really tough time for everybody, but it's also been a tough time for local club and community organisations just trying to feel their way through these kind of realities and changes. I would imagine that's given you a chance to kind of strengthen some of your relationships with those leaders. So I'm keen to just hear a little bit about some of your experiences there.
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having us on the call. As Donald touched on, in March, it was just all systems go, our kind of normal, obviously very operational, lots of projects running, lots and lots of, kind of activity. And then obviously that just all stopped. And we were working from home. I feel very lucky in that our IT was great from the start, so we were able to communicate as a team, which was really, really nice, kind of twice a week, because otherwise I think you can sometimes feel a little bit kind of isolated. And then we basically worked to kind of put a lot of our communication had to move online. We would have in the past met with clubs physically in a meeting to have club forums. So what we did along with other colleagues in the city was we moved to do them online, and actually it's been fantastic. It's been quite an eye-opener in terms of how good they've been. The attendance has been really strong, and I think what it's made us realise was actually we're working with some really, really busy volunteers who are very heavily involved in clubs, and actually coming to a meeting might just be too difficult in terms of logistics or time, etc. Whereas online, you can kind of come on for an hour, and there's been we've been running them across the city, and I do feel as if we've almost done more of that than we would have before lockdown. So I think that's been a real positive, and I do think we will take lessons from that when the kind of new normal, when everything is physically back up and running. And what's been lovely is just the clubs sharing information and supporting each other and kind of helping out where they can, albeit virtually, and talking to each other. But I just think what we're doing right now, we would never have done previously. And I know we've chatted about that, but it's just been quite a revelation in that regard, that actually, Donald's, hours and hours away from where I'm based, but actually we can, chat through projects, take advice from each other. And I think with the clubs, it's just been really, really nice to see. And we've just tried to up that kind of communication side of things in terms of newsletters, trying to share as much information as we can, because obviously on the operational side, that's all had to stop.
Yeah, I mean, I've been connected into the newsletters that you and Jonathan have been sending out, and they're really, really valuable. Just covers all bases for those voluntary leaders and puts everyone in one place. So I commend you for that bit of work. It's an excellent bit of comms. And it's great just to hear, I guess, that, there are more connections being made. I mean, the thing I've always loved about the Hub project is that, from the get-go, we kind of challenged ourselves to be creative and do things differently. And I guess we've kind of given ourselves permission to work and think that way. And now at this time, we're learning probably more than we ever have, because we've been put in more of an extreme position than we ever have. it's great to see it that we're going to take on some of those learnings and use them to improve, which is great. I guess this next question is for both of you, but I'll probably ask you to reflect first, Donald. I talked a little bit about the kind of the values of hubs and what we're trying to achieve. One of the core principles of hubs has always been about understanding community need, and you hear lots of stories over lockdown about the club or community organisation that's, as you said, Jayne, stopped providing activities for their members or their participants, but has set up shop as a food distribution centre, or has sent their coaches into care homes to open up conversations and engage with isolated elderly residents. You hear loads of conversations about understanding what the needs are and then going and providing some support for them. So I'm keen just to hear a little bit from you both. Donald first, about maybe what you've learned about your hubs during this pandemic in terms of how they do understand the community need, or maybe how they don't. I think the big thing about these conversations is we want them to be honest. This isn't really about sugarcoating something. If you have now an observation that a hub really isn't getting the understanding community need bit because of the scenario they've been faced with, it would be great to share some of that. So just keen to get your thoughts on what your takeaway from that might be.
Okay, so I guess first and foremost for me, and this is a wee plug for the Changing Lives cohort 2, which will be on until the end of September. There's a module in there about understanding community need, and that was one of the best modules for me, because as a sort of sports development officer or with a background in sports development, it's always been something that we've talked about and we've tried to do, but going around the East End of Glasgow, mapping that community for someone from the Highlands was really valuable, and there's definitely been some takeaways from that I have tried to apply up here in the Highlands. I suppose a couple of things that jumped out, and this was when I was officially on furlough, but I did notice online what some of the clubs that were connected with one of the hubs were doing. Within a couple of days, they'd got together. It was in Kingussie. They teamed up, few clubs, a local organisation, and like you say, James, they were out delivering medicine, supporting that community in that hour of need. So it made me think that yes, it's so important as hubs we understand community need, but our clubs and those that are on the ground know their communities inside out, and we should always remember that, and we should always just give them the tools to get out and do their job. That was such an impressive thing. Within about 2 or 3 days, they had this whole operation up and running, and that was something that I'll take a lot of learning from too, as well as all the tools that I picked up as part of the Champions programme.
Cool. And what about you, Jayne? What have you observed in Edinburgh around the kind of understanding community need piece, the finger on the pulse and the response?
Yeah, I think listening to a lot of the clubs, I think what has been really interesting is that there's their passion for whatever their activity, their sport is, and on many of the calls, the clubs, well, one, they want to get back to their activity, but their concern over everybody's kind of health and well-being, particularly young people, and they've been doing so much to try and still provide something for that community. So it's a slightly different tact from what Donald has mentioned, but some of the creativity that they've shown, and I know that's not just been Edinburgh. I've heard that from other officers, linking up with clubs in New York and in far off places, and all their online program. That I know some of the clubs have said they've actually had more people engaging in that activity because of them putting that on. And again, that's something that they've just reacted and thought, right, what can we do? We need to keep engaging with our members and with that local community. So that's been really, really good to see. And I know, and I think a lot of those clubs will continue in some aspect that activity once things get back to normal. But it just goes to show the passion out there, I think, in terms of that community and health and well-being as a whole.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing is, I'm pretty sure across all 32 local authorities, someone will have seen one of those examples. That you've talked about two kind of different approaches there, and the international connect blew my mind when I heard that. There's actually a couple of clubs and hubs that are doing that are now, almost shared membership between. I think it was Perth and Kinross and Perth in Australia were joining in on the same class. But everybody's probably got one of those examples. So it's about how we can take those examples and maybe replay some of that, both to colleagues, and obviously, Jayne, you work closely with Jonathan in Edinburgh, and I know you work closely with Katie up the road. Donald, talk to colleagues about what we learned from that, but almost exemplify some of that practice to the clubs and hubs themselves as well. Okay, so next question. You've probably had a little bit of reflection time, Donald. I know you've been busy in that reflection time, so you weren't sitting topping up your tan the whole time, but you've been doing a bit of volunteering whilst on furlough. And I guess what I'm keen to get is, it's not often you get that time away from your desk, away from the calls from volunteer leaders, away from the calls from your boss and colleagues and everybody else. And what have you reflected on, and what coming back in are you going to change?
Yeah, so I managed to do a little bit of volunteering during furlough, and that really opened my eyes a bit to what else is out there in the community. And my role was to phone up some of the most vulnerable people in the community and chat through how they were getting on, and also help facilitate the sort of food deliveries to them as well. So again, linking that back to the sort of Changing Lives champion course, there's a lot of really relevant stuff there. And for me, as a community sport hub officer, that wasn't the sort of conversation that I'd had very often. And, a lot of the more traditional focus clubs were maybe not thinking down that line either in terms of, who their members are. So again, that links into one of the previous questions about community needs. These were the people that had the biggest need in that community. And, off the back of this, we know how important sport and physical activity is mentally and physically. So it's made me think more about where we focus as community sport hubs, and specifically the community that I volunteered in. I now understand that need more, and crucially, I know a few more key partners and organisations that work in that space, and I didn't have that before. So it's been really positive in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, again, if I think back to the kind of the journey of community sport hubs over the last 10 years, and probably above that, the development of the sporting system, it's definitely been a move towards a more community connected sporting offer. I mean, we didn't call them member sport hubs. We called them community sport hubs because our intention was that they supported the members that were already active and participating, but they went beyond that. They started to form new connections in the community that allowed them to understand people in the community that they maybe hadn't provided an offer for. So, it's really interesting just to see that journey and potentially, the experience we've had over the last 5 months through lockdown and now as restrictions ease is given us an opportunity to enhance that. Do you think? Or maybe another. I guess shines a bit of a light on the role that sports clubs can play in some of that community connection. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, for sure. And the ethos of the hub about connecting and joining the dots up, and for me that's given me a few more dots to join up. Yep. And a few of the key community leaders that I might not have had a conversation with before. So that's been really positive.
Great. Okay, so I guess just to finish off, the thing I love about the Community Sport Hub Network is it's a really great group of really enthusiastic, fairly open-minded professional officers, and they want to support each other. You can see that whenever we get together, either physically or virtually. And I guess during lockdown, our personal well-being, we've touched on it a few times in the conversation today, but our personal well-being's been even more of a focus than I can ever remember it being. People are isolated, and there's certainly been more conversations about that. It's really important that we're able to talk to each other about how we feel. As I say, we're a supportive group, so I'm just keen to hear from you both about how you're feeling now, how you're feeling about what's to come. As I say, restrictions are easing. We're starting to see clubs and hubs, operating a little bit more face-to-face again. I think Jayne brought up the point there about the well-being of coaches and participants, and us keeping a really keen eye on that. But how are you guys feeling, just to finish off this kind of conversation today? I would come to you first, Jayne.
Yeah, I think what has helped in general throughout all this, I touched on it already, but is some of the what am I trying to say? The groups that Sport Scotland have put together, so like the hot topic calls, etc., have really helped me through this. In that you're with like-minded colleagues, you're discussing very kind of topical issues that you can then take back. And hopefully, take some learnings away. And they've been on, virtually every week throughout all of this. There was a bit of a break, but I would suggest that anybody who's not been dipping into them in the future, any of the webinars, to do take advantage of that, because that has been really, really nice, kind of getting to know colleagues nationally, as well as within your own authority. And I think there's only benefits to be gained from that. Certainly personally, I feel a real benefit from getting to know some of the colleagues elsewhere in the country. Other than that, it's been a unique time, hasn't it? I feel lucky that I've been at home and we've all been fit and well, and I feel personally well in that regard. And I think keeping in touch with your own colleagues and your team is really important too, because everybody's different and everybody has ups and downs. And I think, again, having this kind of online way of chatting to people is really certainly been good for me. And I think been good for colleagues who I've chatted to, and that it's different from talking on the phone, isn't it? You can actually see people. And I think otherwise it would have felt quite isolated. You would have felt quite isolated in a kind of work environment. But yeah, it's good to see things starting to hopefully develop and kind of things get started back. Albeit it's a little bit frustrating. We all want to go faster, but we also appreciate there's nothing more important than everybody's health and well-being. And I think for me, it does put that into context, and that at the end of the day, that's what's important.
Yeah. Well, I guess, thanks for sharing that. I guess my kind of personal observation on yourself, Jayne, is you've kind of thrown yourself into those hot topic calls, those group calls. I've been involved in a lot of them, and you've been engaged in them all. So it's great to hear that's, I guess, scratching an itch. That's helping you, because yes, it's about a project at the end of the day, but it's also about people. And I go back to my point about the Hub Officer Network. It is a great group of people, so we'll do more of them. We're making that commitment to establish more of those conversations for sure. What about you, Donald, then, just in terms of parting observations about, I guess, where you're at, how you're feeling right now?
I suppose, like Jayne, I almost feel like I'm almost more connected with quite a few of my colleagues. Being up in the Highlands and in a rural area, it can be quite an isolated role, like many of the staff, up here. So it's been great to tie in with other hub officers, RDMs, just colleagues from my organisation as well. It's been a wee bit challenging in that, like many other people, I've been tasked with other projects to look at, not necessarily related to hubs. So, for instance, looking after a couple of bunkhouses and bringing facilities back online. So there's been a lot of useful learning which I can take into my role, but it has it's created sort of new challenges in terms of how I work. So that's something that hopefully over the next few months, as lots of my colleagues come back from furlough, I'll be able to hit the hub officer job at 100% and fully get back into that as well. One of my insights, I suppose, is how important physical activity is for my own health and well-being, and it's probably one of the benefits of working from home, that you can get out for that run in the morning, or go out and mow your lawn at night and maybe not be commuting as much. And certainly up here and as the rest of the country, the amount of people that have been out in green spaces, whether it's walking, cycling, picnics, camping with a family, and it's made me think of how important green health is, and as a hub officer, how our hubs can work in that space too, because we all know the challenges with indoor facilities and other challenges before COVID, that hopefully there'll be a wee bit of a culture change, and as hub officers we'll be able to support that, enabling more people to access sort of green health and be happier and healthier at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic message to finish on. Certainly I've never experienced a time when our senior leaders in the country are talking so frequently about the importance of physical and mental well-being. It will be a challenge, I think, to maintain those conversations as reality starts to hit back in and all the other, I guess, perils of life come back on the table. But really great to hear you guys are in a positive place, and I know in your hub role with the project group here, you're going to provide as much support as you possibly can to your colleagues from across the other 30 local authorities. So huge thanks to both of you for getting the ball rolling and I guess openly sharing your reflections on lockdown life. Our aim is to, with these sessions, is to reinforce, challenge and stimulate hub officers' thoughts. We know in the hub project that we're going to have to make some mistakes, fail if we're going to learn and improve. And we know that lockdown's been a really uncomfortable time for everyone, but it's taught us a heck of a lot, I guess, as the last kind of half hour's just demonstrated. So for the Hub Officer Network, we encourage you just to reflect on what you've heard today and use those reflections to make some improvements. And we'll see you all again the next time we run one of these sessions. Thanks again, guys, and take care.